In a quiet little town surrounded by green hills and thick woods, there lived an elderly woman named Clara. She was not someone people paid much attention to. Her silver hair was always tied neatly in a bun, and her hands, though wrinkled with age, moved gracefully as she worked in her garden or cleaned her small cottage. Most of the townsfolk thought of her as just another old lady who kept to herself. But what they didn't know was that Clara carried a secret hidden behind the closed doors of her modest home. Clara's life hadn't always been so simple or lonely. Once upon a time, she had dazzled audiences around the world with her violin. Her fingers danced across the strings like magic, creating melodies that could make listeners laugh, cry, or feel hope all at once. Cities like Paris, Vienna, and London had welcomed her with open arms, and critics praised her as one of the finest musicians of her generation. However, fame wasn't kind to Clara. Over the years, she lost everything dear to her. Her husband passed away, her only child moved far away and eventually stopped writing, and the music industry changed so much that her style no longer fit in. Heartbroken and tired, Clara left the stage for good and returned to her hometown, where she chose to live quietly, away from the spotlight. Her days now revolved around tending to her flowers, feeding the birds that visited her yard, and occasionally playing her violin late at night when no one else was awake. The instrument she played was old but precious, handed down from her father, who had taught her how to hold a bow before she could even read. Playing it brought back memories of happier times but also sadness, so she played softly, almost secretly, as if afraid that letting the music out too loudly might invite trouble into her peaceful life. The townspeople rarely noticed Clara unless they needed advice about gardening or saw her walking slowly to the market. To them, she was just a sweet, harmless old woman. No one suspected that beneath her calm exterior lay a treasure trove of talent and stories waiting to be told. Little did Clara know, however, that her quiet existence was about to change forever, and not necessarily in a way she would have chosen. One evening, while the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky orange and pink, Clara sat by her window, cradling her violin. As usual, she began to play a soft lullaby, unaware that outside her house shadows lurked. A group of young men, bored and looking for excitement, had wandered close to her home. They heard the faint strains of music drifting through the air, and paused, curious. When they realized it was coming from Clara's house, they exchanged mischievous grins. None of them knew who she really was or what she was capable of, but their discovery set off a chain of events that would leave the entire town talking for years to come. The group of young men who had stumbled upon Clara's secret didn't waste any time. They were bored, restless, and always on the lookout for something to entertain themselves. Hearing the soft, haunting notes coming from Clara's house sparked their curiosity at first, but it quickly turned into an idea, one fueled by mischief rather than admiration. To them, the thought of an old woman playing the violin was amusing, almost laughable. None of them stopped to consider that she might have been good at it, or that there could be a deeper story behind her music. The leader of the group, a tall, lanky boy named Jake, was particularly excited. He loved being the center of attention and thrived on stirring up trouble. "Can you imagine?" he whispered to his friends with a sly grin. "An old lady like her trying to play? It'll be hilarious." His words ignited a spark in the others, and soon they were all nodding eagerly, their minds racing with plans. They decided that the perfect place to expose Clara's supposed incompetence would be during the annual village fair, a lively event, where everyone gathered to eat, drink, and enjoy performances. It was the busiest day of the year, and if they could get Clara on stage, the whole town would witness their prank. Over the next few days, the boys kept watch over Clara's house, waiting for the right moment to act. They noticed how she played, late at night when she thought no one was around, as if she wanted to keep her music private. This made them even more determined to force her into the open. One afternoon, while Clara was watering her flowers in the garden, they approached her, cautiously. At first, they pretended to be friendly, complimenting her roses and asking about her life. Clara, kind-hearted as she was, welcomed their questions and offered them lemonade. But their intentions became clear when Jake abruptly brought up the subject of the violin. "We heard you playing last night," he said, his tone teasing. "You're pretty brave to still try at your age." The other boys snickered, but Clara stiffened, clutching the watering can tightly. She didn't respond, hoping they would lose interest and leave. Instead, Jake leaned closer, his voice dripping with mockery. "Why don't you show us what you've got? Maybe you can play for everyone at the fair this weekend. Wouldn't that be fun?" Clara shook her head firmly, her face pale. "I don't think that's a good idea," she murmured softly, avoiding their eyes. But the boys weren't about to give up so easily. Their smiles disappeared, replaced by smirks that sent a chill down Clara's spine. Jake stepped forward, his tone suddenly threatening. "Come on, Granny, don't be shy. Unless—" He paused dramatically, letting the implication hang in the air. "Unless you're scared, you'll embarrass yourself." When Clara still refused, the boys grew bolder. They began making idle threats about breaking her flower pots, ruining her garden, or telling lies about her to the neighbors. Each word felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Clara knew she couldn't fight back. She was outnumbered, and too frail to stand up to their bullying. Reluctantly, she nodded, her heart heavy with dread. The boys cheered, patting each other on the back as if they'd won some great victory. As they walked away, laughing and planning how they would humiliate her in front of the entire town, Clara stood motionless in her garden, tears welling up in her eyes. She spent the rest of the day sitting alone in her cottage, staring at her violin. Memories of her past flooded her mind, the applause, the standing ovations, the joy of sharing her gift with the world. But those memories were now tinged with sadness. Would anyone remember? Or would they only see an old woman trembling under the pressure of cruel jokes? The thought terrified her, yet deep inside, a small part of her stirred. A flicker of defiance she hadn't felt in years. Whatever happened, she realized, she couldn't let fear control her anymore. The morning of the village fair arrived and the town buzzed with excitement. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, stalls lined the streets with freshly baked pies, handmade crafts, and games for children, while the smell of roasted nuts and caramel filled the air. Laughter echoed through the square as families gathered to enjoy the festivities. It was a day meant for joy and celebration, but for Clara, it felt like the longest walk she had ever taken. Jake and his friends came to her house early, their faces smug and confident. They didn't bother hiding their intentions anymore. "Ready to show everyone what you've got, Granny?" Jake sneered as he pushed open her garden gate. Clara stood on her porch, clutching her violin case tightly against her chest. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to take slow, steady steps toward them. She knew there was no turning back now. As they led her through the crowded streets, whispers began to spread among the townsfolk. People stopped what they were doing to stare at the unusual sight, an elderly woman being escorted by a group of rowdy young men. Some recognized Clara and furrowed their brows in confusion, wondering why she looked so uneasy. Others simply assumed she was part of some act or performance organized by the boys. No one dared to ask questions, though. The energy around them shifted from curiosity to unease as the group made its way to the center of the fairground. In the middle of the bustling square stood a small wooden stage, hastily set up for local entertainers. A few musicians had already performed earlier in the day, filling the air with cheerful tunes that matched the lively atmosphere. Now, however, the stage sat empty, waiting for its next performer. When Jake climbed onto it and grabbed a makeshift microphone, the chatter in the crowd died down. Everyone turned to see what was happening. "Hey, everyone," Jake called out, his voice loud and brimming with false enthusiasm. "We've got a special surprise for you today." He gestured dramatically toward Clara, who hesitated at the edge of the stage. His grin widened as he added, "This here is Clara. She says she used to be a musician back in the day. Can you believe it? So we thought, why not let her prove it? Let's give her a round of applause." The audience clapped politely, though many exchanged puzzled glances. Some people chuckled nervously, unsure whether this was meant to be funny or serious. A few older villagers frowned, sensing something wasn't quite right about the situation. Meanwhile, Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. The Weight of all those eyes on her felt suffocating. She gripped the violin case even tighter, her knuckles turning white. Jake jumped off the stage and approached her, his smirk unwavering. "Come on, Granny," he said, grabbing her arm roughly and pulling her forward. "Don't keep us waiting." Clara stumbled slightly but managed to catch herself. She glanced at the crowd, searching for a friendly face, or anyone who might step in to stop this cruel spectacle. But the sea of curious onlookers only stared back, silent and unmoving. When she finally stepped onto the stage, the murmurs grew louder. Up close, people could see how frail she looked, her simple dress and worn shoes making her seem out of place amidst the festive chaos. Jake handed her a battered violin. One of the boys had brought it just in case she tried to refuse, and announced, "Go ahead, show us what you can do." His tone dripped with mockery, and a few scattered laughs rippled through the audience. Clara closed her eyes for a brief moment, trying to steady her breathing. She could feel the heat of embarrassment burning her cheeks, but beneath it lay something else, a flicker of determination. Slowly, she opened the violin case and took out her own instrument, ignoring the cracked one thrust into her hands. The wood gleamed faintly under the sunlight, polished from years of care. As she adjusted the violin under her chin, the crowd fell silent, watching intently. No one spoke, no one moved. For better or worse, all eyes were on Clara, and whatever happened next would change everything. The silence on the stage was deafening. Clara stood there, her frail frame dwarfed by the vastness of the crowd stretching out before her. The sunlight glinted off the polished surface of her violin, casting faint reflections that danced across the wooden platform beneath her feet. Her trembling hands adjusted the instrument, finding its familiar weight both comforting and daunting. For a moment she hesitated, her mind racing with doubts. Would they laugh? Would they jeer? Or would they simply dismiss her as an old woman trying and failing to relive her past? Jake stood at the edge of the stage, arms crossed, his smirk still firmly in place. He leaned casually against one of the support beams, clearly enjoying the spectacle he had orchestrated. His friends were scattered among the audience, snickering and whispering to each other, waiting for Clara to make a fool of herself. They had envisioned this moment countless times, imagining her fumbling over the strings, producing awkward, discordant notes that would send the crowd into fits of laughter. But none of them could have anticipated what came next. Clara took a deep breath, closing her eyes as if to block out the sea of faces staring up at her. She focused instead on the feel of the violin tucked under her chin, the cool smoothness of the bow in her hand, and the memories flooding back like a tide. Memories of concert halls filled with elegant chandeliers, of audiences holding their breath as she played, of standing ovations that brought tears to her eyes. This wasn't just an instrument. It was a part of her soul, a piece of who she was. And now, despite the humiliation and fear gripping her heart, she decided she wouldn't let it be tarnished. With slow, deliberate movements, Clara raised the bow to the strings. The first note rang out clear and pure, cutting through the tense silence like a blade slicing through fog. It was a single, haunting tone that seemed to hang suspended in the air, lingering long after the vibration faded. The crowd froze, their collective breath catching in unison. Even Jake's smirk faltered slightly as he tilted his head, surprised by the unexpected beauty of the sound. Encouraged by the reaction, or perhaps too lost in the music to care anymore, Clara continued. Her fingers moved deftly along the fingerboard, coaxing melody after melody from the strings. Each note carried emotion, painting vivid pictures in the minds of those listening. There was sorrow in the low, mournful tones, joy in the bright, skipping rhythms, and resilience in the steady, unwavering pace she maintained. It was as though every feeling Clara had ever experienced, every triumph, every loss, every moment of love and pain, was being poured into the music. The audience, which moments ago had been skeptical and amused, now sat spellbound. Mothers held their children closer. Fathers stopped midway through sipping their drinks, and even the rowdiest teenagers fell silent. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched Clara intently, marveling at how someone so small and seemingly fragile could produce something so powerful. Tears began to well up in more than a few eyes, though no one wiped them away. They didn't want to miss a single second of the performance. Even Jake, who had started this whole ordeal intending to mock her, found himself unable to look away. His arms dropped to his sides and his jaw slackened slightly as he listened. He hadn't expected this, not even close. The old woman he'd dismissed as nothing more than an easy target for his cruel prank was transforming before his very eyes. Gone was the timid, hesitant figure who had stepped onto the stage. In her place stood a musician, pouring her heart into every note, commanding the attention of everyone present. As the melody swelled, reaching a crescendo that sent shivers down spines, the atmosphere in the square shifted entirely. What had begun as a cruel joke had turned into something transcendent, a moment of connection between one person's artistry and the hearts of an entire community. Clara played on, oblivious to the transformation happening around her. For the first time in years, she wasn't playing for fame or applause. She was playing because she had to, for herself, for the music, and for the chance to remind the world, and herself, that she still mattered. As Clara continued to play, the music seemed to take on a life of its own. It wasn't just sound anymore, it was storytelling, raw and unfiltered, weaving together threads of her past and present into a tapestry that resonated deeply with everyone listening. Each note carried weight, as if it had been stored inside her for years, waiting patiently to be released. The crowd could feel it, the ache of loss in the slower passages, the flicker of hope in the lighter melodies, and the quiet strength in the steady rhythm that held everything together. Her fingers danced across the strings with a precision and grace that defied her age. No one in the audience could believe what they were witnessing. This wasn't the shaky, uncertain performance they had anticipated. It was something extraordinary. The violin sang under her touch, producing sounds so rich and full-bodied that it felt like an entire orchestra was hidden within the single instrument. People exchanged glances, their earlier doubts replaced by awe. Even those who didn't understand music couldn't help but feel moved by the sheer emotion pouring out of every note. Clara's face, once tense with fear, softened as she became completely absorbed in the music. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness or shame. They were tears of release. For decades, she had kept her talent locked away, afraid to share it after losing so much in her life. But now, standing on that stage, she realized that her music wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to anyone willing to listen, to anyone who needed a reminder that beauty could still exist even after hardship. The melody shifted again, growing softer and more introspective. It was as though Clara was inviting the audience into her world, showing them glimpses of her happiest moments and her darkest days. Some people swayed gently where they stood, while others instinctively reached for the hands of loved ones beside them. A young mother hugged her child tighter, a teenage boy wiped his eyes without embarrassment, and an elderly man sitting near the front nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what Clara was trying to say. Jake, who had started this cruel prank, stood rooted to the spot, his earlier arrogance melting away. He had never heard anything like this before. Music that made you forget where you were, who you were, and why you were there. All he could do was stare at Clara, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. Guilt gnawed at him as he realized how wrong he had been to treat her this way. She wasn't just some old lady to laugh at. She was someone with a story, someone with a gift that deserved respect. His friends, scattered throughout the crowd, wore similar expressions of shock and remorse. When Clara finally played the last note, the silence that followed was profound. The final vibration of the string hung in the air for what felt like an eternity before fading away completely. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire town was holding its breath, unwilling to break the spell her music had cast over them. Then, slowly, a single pair of hands began to clap. It was the elderly man near the front, his eyes glistening with tears. One by run. Others joined in until the entire square erupted into thunderous applause. People cheered, whistling and stomping their feet, their voices rising in waves of admiration and gratitude. Clara lowered her violin, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she tried to catch her breath. She looked out at the sea of faces, many of which were smiling through tears, and for the first time in years she felt seen, not as an old woman, not as a relic of the past, but as a musician, an artist, a human being with something valuable to offer. Even Jake stepped forward, his usual bravado replaced by humility. He climbed back onto the stage, his face flushed with embarrassment, and approached Clara cautiously. I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice barely audible over the cheers. Clara turned to look at him, her expression unreadable at first. Then, after a long pause, she gave a small, weary nod. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her music had already said it all, but the transformation wasn't just happening on stage. In the hearts of everyone watching, something had shifted. Clara's performance had reminded them of the power of art to heal, to connect, and to transcend differences. And as the applause continued, echoing through the square like a promise of renewal, it became clear that this moment would stay with them forever, a testament to the fact that greatness can emerge when we least expect it, often from the most unexpected places. The applause didn't die down quickly. It swelled and echoed, filling the square with a warmth that chased away any lingering traces of cruelty or mockery. Clara stood on the stage, still clutching her violin, as wave after wave of cheers washed over her. The crowd wasn't just clapping, they were celebrating. Some people whistled loudly, others wiped tears from their eyes, and a few even shouted words of praise. "Bravo! Amazing! Thank you, Clara." For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not as an old woman living quietly, on the edge of town, but as someone who mattered, someone whose presence could touch lives. Jake and his friends looked around at the cheering crowd, their faces flushed with shame. They had come to the fair expecting laughter and ridicule, but instead they found themselves surrounded by admiration for Clara. Their prank had backfired spectacularly, turning into something far greater than they ever imagined. Jake stepped closer to Clara again, his earlier bravado completely gone. This time he spoke louder so everyone could hear him. "We were wrong about you," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "You're incredible. I'm sorry for what we did." Clara turned to face him, her expression softening. She didn't say anything right away. Instead, she studied his face carefully, as if searching for sincerity. Then, after a long pause, she nodded slowly. Her silence spoke volumes. It was neither forgiveness nor condemnation, but an acknowledgement of his apology. That small gesture seemed to mean the world to Jake, who lowered his head in quiet reflection. His friends followed suit, each one visibly shaken by the weight of what they'd done. As the initial excitement began to settle, people started approaching the stage, eager to speak to Clara. An older woman pushed her way through the crowd, holding out a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked earlier that morning. "This is for you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your music reminded me of my mother. She used to play the piano like that." Others soon joined in, offering kind words, hugs, and heartfelt thanks. A young girl shyly handed Clara a drawing she had made, a picture of a violin surrounded by stars, and whispered, "You're magic." Even the mayor of the town climbed onto the stage, clearing his throat to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming, "today, we witnessed something truly special. Clara has reminded us all of the power of art and resilience. Let's make sure this doesn't end here. I propose we organize regular concerts featuring Clara's music so everyone can experience it again and again." The crowd erupted into cheers once more, and Clara, though overwhelmed, managed a small smile. Word of her performance spread like wildfire beyond the fairgrounds. By evening, nearly every household in the town knew about Clara's breathtaking display of talent. Neighbors who had barely noticed her before now knocked on her door, bringing food, flowers, and offers of help. Someone even suggested renovating her garden shed into a practice space where she could play without disturbing anyone, or being disturbed herself. Clara graciously accepted these gestures, though she remained humble, insisting she was simply doing what made her happy. But the ripple effects of her performance went deeper than acts of kindness. The townsfolk began to see each other differently too. Conversations shifted from gossip and complaints to discussions about how they could support local artists and musicians. Inspired by Clara's courage, a group of teenagers decided to start a community band while parents encouraged their children to take up instruments. Even Jake and his friends vowed to turn over a new leaf, volunteering at the library and helping set up events for seniors. For Clara, the change was profound. What had begun as a humiliating ordeal orchestrated by mischief makers had transformed into a moment of redemption, not just for her, but for the entire town. She realized that her music wasn't just a personal refuge anymore. It was a bridge connecting her to others, a way to inspire and heal. And as she sat in her cottage later that night, cradling her violin and gazing out at the starlit sky, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in decades. Life, she thought, had a funny way of surprising you when you least expected it. The days that followed Clara's unforgettable performance at the village fair were nothing short of transformative, for Clara and for the entire town. The once overlooked elderly woman became a symbol of resilience, talent, and the unexpected. Ways life could surprise you. People who had walked past her house without a second glance now stopped to chat, bringing small gifts or simply offering companionship. Her garden, always vibrant and well-tended, became a gathering spot where neighbors lingered to hear stories about her travels, her music, and the life she had lived before retreating into quiet solitude. True to his word, the mayor wasted no time organizing concerts featuring Clara. The first event was held just 2 weeks after the fair in the town hall, which was transformed into an intimate venue with rows of chairs, soft lighting, and flower arrangements donated by local florists. News of the concert spread quickly, drawing not only villagers but also curious visitors from nearby towns. On the night of the performance, the room buzzed with anticipation. Every seat filled and some people standing along the walls just to catch a glimpse of the woman whose music had captured so many hearts. When Clara stepped onto the makeshift stage, wearing a simple yet elegant dress borrowed from a neighbor, the audience erupted into applause. She smiled shyly, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the violin under her chin. But the moment she began to play, all traces of nervousness vanished. Once again, her music transported everyone present, weaving emotions into melodies that spoke directly to their souls. This time, however, there was no fear or hesitation, only joy. Clara played pieces from her youth, classical compositions she adored, and even a few folk tunes that made the crowd clap along. After the concert, people lined up to thank her personally. Some shared how her music had helped them through difficult times. Others expressed gratitude for reminding them of loved ones they had lost. A young boy handed her a handwritten note that read, "You are my hero," while a middle-aged man confessed he had never appreciated classical music until that evening. Clara listened to each story with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and connection. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged to this community, to these people, to this moment. Jake and his friends also underwent a remarkable change. Determined to make amends, they threw themselves into helping organize future events for Clara and other local artists. They cleaned up the town square, painted murals celebrating creativity, and even started attending rehearsals to learn more about music themselves. Jake in particular sought opportunities to spend time with Clara, often visiting her cottage to help with chores or simply sit quietly while she practiced. At first, their interactions were awkward, but over time, a genuine bond formed between them. Clara saw beyond their earlier cruelty, recognizing the remorse and desire to grow in their actions. Inspired by Clara's influence, the town embraced a cultural renaissance. Art classes sprang up in the community center. Poetry readings became a monthly tradition, and impromptu jam sessions brought musicians of all ages together. Even those who didn't consider themselves artistic found ways to contribute. Bakers prepared snacks for events, carpenters built stages, and children decorated flyers to promote upcoming performances. The spirit of collaboration and creativity united the town in a way no one had anticipated. For Clara, this newfound sense of purpose breathed new life into her days. She rediscovered the joy of teaching, offering lessons to eager students who marveled at her patience and skill. One of her most devoted pupils was a shy teenage girl named Emily, whose parents had initially insisted she take up piano lessons. After hearing Clara play, Emily begged to switch instruments, and within months she was performing duets with her teacher at local gatherings. Watching Emily blossom gave Clara immense satisfaction. It reminded her of the importance of passing on knowledge and passion to the next generation. As weeks turned into months, Clara's presence continued to ripple through the town, leaving behind a legacy of hope and inspiration. What had begun as a cruel prank had blossomed into something extraordinary, a reminder that even in moments of darkness, light can emerge if given the chance. And for Clara, the journey wasn't just about reclaiming her identity as a musician. It was about discovering a deeper sense of belonging, purpose, and the enduring power of human connection. As the seasons changed, so did the rhythm of life in the small town. Clara's concerts became a cherished tradition, drawing larger crowds, each time and filling the air with melodies that seemed to echo long after the final note had faded. The townspeople looked forward to these evenings not just for the music, but for the sense of unity they brought. Neighbors who had once been strangers now greeted each other warmly, their shared love for Clara's performances creating bonds that extended beyond the concert hall. It was as if her violin had woven an invisible thread through the community, pulling everyone closer together. Clara herself flourished under this renewed attention, though she remained humble despite her newfound fame. She continued to live in her modest cottage, tending to her garden and playing her violin late into the night when the world was quiet. But there was a noticeable lightness about her now, a spring in her step and a sparkle in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Teaching had reignited something within her, reminding her of the joy of sharing her gift with others. Her students, ranging from wide-eyed children to curious adults, adored her gentle guidance and unwavering encouragement. Many of them began performing alongside her at local events, their confidence growing with every bowstroke. One crisp autumn evening, the town organized a special gala to honor Clara. Held outdoors beneath strings of twinkling fairy lights, the event featured speeches, performances by her students, and of course a solo piece by Clara herself. As she stood on the stage bathed in golden light, the crowd erupted into applause so thunderous it seemed to shake the very ground. The mayor presented her with a plaque declaring her the heart of the town, a title that left her speechless. When she finally managed to speak, her voice trembled with emotion. "I never imagined I'd find such kindness here," she said softly. "Thank you for letting me share my music and my heart with all of you." Jake and his friends played a pivotal role in organizing the gala, determined to make amends for their earlier cruelty. They worked tirelessly behind the scenes, setting up chairs, decorating the venue, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. During the ceremony, Jake stepped forward to deliver a heartfelt apology in front of the entire town. "What we did to Clara was wrong," he admitted, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "But she showed us what true strength looks like, not holding grudges but finding beauty even in pain. She changed our lives and we'll always be grateful." His words earned him a standing ovation, and Clara, seated nearby, gave him a warm smile that spoke volumes. The ripple effects of Clara's influence reached far beyond the borders of the town. Local newspapers wrote articles about her story, inspiring readers across the region. A filmmaker visited to document her journey, capturing intimate moments of her teaching, performing, and interacting with the townspeople. The resulting short film was screened at a regional arts festival, where it won awards and sparked conversations about the importance of preserving culture and supporting artists of all ages. Clara, ever modest, laughed off the accolades, insisting she was just an ordinary woman doing what she loved. In the years that followed, Clara's legacy only grew stronger. The town established an annual music festival in her name, inviting musicians from neighboring areas to perform alongside local talent. Schools incorporated her story into their curriculums, teaching students about resilience, forgiveness, and the transformative power of art. Even after Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 92, her spirit lived on in the vibrant, cultural scene she had helped create. Her violin, lovingly preserved, found a permanent home in the town museum, displayed alongside photographs and mementos from her life. Visitors often paused in front of the exhibit, marveling at the tale of the unassuming woman whose music had touched countless hearts. And every year, during the music festival, someone would take the stage and play one of Clara's favorite pieces, a tribute to the woman who had reminded them all that greatness could emerge from the most unexpected places. Clara's story became more than just a memory. It became a lesson, a testament to the fact that no matter how hidden or forgotten our talents may seem, they have the power to shine brightly when given the chance. Through her courage, kindness, and unwavering dedication to her craft, Clara had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of everyone fortunate enough to know her. And so her melody continued to play, echoing through the hills and hearts of the town she had come to call home.